Mysterious Skin is a film directed by Greg Araki. The film centers around two teenage boys in 1981. One becomes obsessed with UFOs, while the other becomes a gay hustler, both of which the direct result of the childhood trauma that they endured together. The film is powerful and impactful and can inform and showcase the effects of abuse as a child and the subsequent effects of suppressing them. For example, Brian grows increasingly frustrated and fixated on his fantasy of an alien abduction that he believes he endured in his youth. He eventually discovers that he was never abducted. Instead, he was a victim of sexual abuse as a minor. This delusion that Brian developed can best be described as his young and impressionable brain trying to numb and romanticize the true horror that he was subjected to. The summer I was 8 years old, 5 hours disappeared from my life. 5 hours. Lost. Gone without a trace, he states. This is the result of Brian suppressing the memory from his consciousness and eventually leads him to develop his story of an alien abduction. Many instances of this phenomenon can be found in the real world. Famously, psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross identified the 5 stages of grief in her book On Death and Dying. This consists of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Brian's manic state can be first categorized as denial. He subconsciously refuses to come to terms with reality and paints his false narrative of an alien abduction, denying any form of truth or reality. The science behind the denial of trauma stems from the fact that humans cannot compute nor comprehend a traumatic event instantaneously. Instead, our stubborn nature acts as a defense mechanism to help minimize the pain and anguish that one may experience whilst grieving. Denial is the brain's first response to tragedy. This is because it takes time to fully digest and process reality and emotions. During this process, we invalidate reality, often resulting in the brain warping actuality and creating a hallucination much like our protagonist, Brian. Neil's character arc is an excellent depiction of how humans respond to trauma and the influence that our seniors have on a young and easily influenced mind. For example, whilst Brian develops a fixation for aliens as the result of trauma, Neil develops strong sexual tendencies similar to that of a nymphomaniac. Neil works as a gay prostitute with a kink for middle-aged men. This is due to his desire to best simulate that of when he was molested as a child. Neil's easily influenced mind wasn't emotionally mature enough to identify emotions and the true intent of his molester. Neil wanted to best recreate his sexual encounter as a child because during this time he felt a feeling of warmth, purpose, and innocence rather than what it really was, pedophilia at the hands of a sick man. During his adolescence, Neil has a nihilistic philosophy towards life, being described as a bottomless black hole that you fall into. This is because he feels a sense of incarceration living in a small town in the middle of nowhere, even stating, "I am so sick of this stinking little butt crack of a town."
I'm so fucking sick of this stinking little butt crack of a town!
I believe he feels this way because in his interpretation, his molester filled him with happiness and excitement, a complete dichotomy of his life now. Neil's story is reflective of the consequences that a bad influence can have on the youth. Because his molester disguises the abuse as fun, Neil willingly allows him to do it, unaware of the severity of the act that he is doing. After multiple sexual assaults, Neil grows fond of it. This leads to Neil's eventual job as a prostitute, where he gets both physically and verbally abused.
Suck it, slut.
Neil's story showed me the power and influence that an adult can have on a young and innocent mind, and what this influence can do to deter one's future. To illustrate, many drug addicts grow up in households where it is normal and celebrated to abuse substances. This casual nature in which drugs are consumed can often have an instrumental impact on a child's upbringing and can result in their brains thinking being dependent on drugs is acceptable. Overall, this film taught me about the dangers that can stem from abuse as a child and the different ways that people digest and cope with it. I saw this through the compelling character arcs of both Neil and Brian's life. The messages in this film are extremely relevant in today's world, as I identified parallels between both Brian and Neil's life to the real world. This picture also informed me of the long-term consequences and gave me insight into the science behind grief. I heavily recommend this picture as it has given me wisdom and education on the very serious topic of abuse and how people grieve and eventually find acceptance.